So, good evening, everyone. It's great to see you all. This is the first tutorial for our level 5. You saw on the group that I put down a suggested name. It's not our name, but I'd like you to have some input into it. Oh, here's Lisa. Let's just admit Lisa. Because it's important that I feel that you feel comfortable about sitting behind that name or in front of that name or whichever place you want to sit. So please give it some consideration. We don't need to decide just yet, but I think it's important that we think about that. So this is the first time we've actually run this course as a properly accredited course. So last time we did it, it was a CPD with hope of an accreditation. I know I loved Anne's comment about surviving laser. We've survived the accreditation process. So hopefully you guys and all of us can survive the actual going through the accreditation process. But yeah, it is quite a process. It did take longer than we rather hoped it would do. Anyway, I hope everyone's had a chance to read the manual. As you probably all saw, it's draft version 1. And that's because we sort of anticipate there might be changes. And going on from there, I just want to ask all of you for patience. There will be things that won't work perhaps how we want it to. But as I said, you're the first one. So we do need your feedback on stuff. Hopefully there's some nice feedback too, but mainly it's more about this didn't quite work, maybe this can change or whatever. We do need that, because obviously we put things in place that we hope will work, but maybe they don't. So that's good. I'm reading my notes now, as you can see. I think one of the most exciting things for me about this level 5 is obviously expanding our knowledge. And that for me is so critical as a group. I want us all to be moving forwards. I want us all to be spearheading really good and ethical rehabilitation techniques, expanding your knowledge. But the way you're doing that is actually an experiential way. And I just wanted to explain that really fully. It's more about expanding your knowledge based on what you're doing already. So you are doing your treatments, but you're applying different techniques, different methods, different understandings, different learnings, and seeing what the change is. And that, to me, is a really exciting way to learn, because I think if we looked at us as a group, we're all hungry for knowledge. We understand that everything has got to be validated and substantiated, either by science or by just extensive practice. But equally, we're all very practical. So we like to actually try it out and use it. And I'm excited to hear of some of the changes that you will hear from some of our techniques that you will be using. Now, what we're going to do is introduce a couple of new techniques or advanced techniques. Some of them you may be using already. You may have adapted them yourself. But we're going to be introducing a couple at the end of every session. So then you can build up your portfolio, because you've then got a chance to use them and perhaps come back with the next tutorial and see how, if you have managed to integrate them into a treatment, what effects you've had. So that's a sort of the plan. So we're starting, it's like a bit of a spiral. We're starting in the middle. We're just sort of building out and building up and building up. And the other thing is that's really important, these tutorials, yeah, I'm going to be imparting stuff and slides and thoughts and knowledge and information, but we're all peers. So I want it to be discussion too. It's really important, because you've all been out there treating, you've all got different experiences and different knowledge. So it's important that we bring that together and share. And I know that Zoom, these type of environments are not necessarily conducive for that. But I really want to encourage people to just speak and say things, because we're a safe group. It's a safe environment here. If you say something and you think, oh, that's a bit stupid, it doesn't matter, because it's never stupid. It's always going to be interesting. And we'll always be able to use whatever information and knowledge you have. So that's really important. The other really important thing are your reflections. And I know going through the level 3, going, oh, another reflection, which may have been a little bit of a sort of a necessary part of the course. But for this, it is essential for your personal knowledge and growth. So do voice notes. You don't need to write up your reflections. Do voice notes. Look back on them, because you've got to remember your journey too. However, when you produce reflections as an assessment, please don't send all of your thoughts. Please put them into a little sort of, we've got the template for you, because you just got to remember that, you've got to be read and assessed. So key points, highlights would be good. But if you can perhaps get into the habit of just, as I said, maybe making voice notes for yourself, I think that's a really powerful way of learning. Because I don't know about anyone that does any teaching, it's actually a very powerful way of learning yourself, because just by talking things through, even if it's to your phone, you go, oh, I hadn't thought of that. It's actually talking it through, even to yourself, let alone to other peers or other students, that you learn a lot. So reflections, please, are really, really powerful learning for you. So what I'm really trying to get for you all to do, and I know you all look at dogs in a very global way, but I want that to be even more so. I really want you to look at the dog as a one entity and look at how you're going to help that whole entity. I mean, I still hear and still see a few messages, and there's nothing wrong with this at all, but a few messages about things like, there's this condition, what do you think? Now, the vet treats the condition, we treat the effects of the condition. Now, I think it's very important that we understand what condition it is from a sort of a knowledge perspective. But when it comes down to what you're treating, you treat the effects of that condition, whatever it may be. And of course, every condition affects every dog very, very differently. So I really want you to be absolutely in that space. So you're not, even though you've got that as background, because that's vital, I want you to be looking at the dog as that dog in front of you. So I think that's all the blah. We will now just move on to the first set of slides. Is everyone comfortable with that so far? Excellent, excellent, excellent. Faye, you're looking very serious, and your learning face is, I remember it being pretty scary. It's very serious face.
That's going to give me a complete paranoid complex now you've said that.
Actually, you're normally eating, so carry on eating. Brilliant. Right, let's go into this first set of slides. So I've just got to remember how to do this, basically. And then I've got to show you. So I've been working on Google Docs the whole time, and then going on to Zoom. It's sort of a little different. Right, can everyone understand introduction to the 6P's? Yeah, great. Let me actually make you guys larger so I can see you all. Try to anyway. There we go. Right, now I've got you on my screen. Okay, so the 6P's is something that I came up with a while ago, and it really is this. And I put that on the Moodle it really is trying to work out a way of trying to logically, practically assess a dog based on these principles. Now, it may be that it's not something that it fits with you. You're not going to be assessed on the 6P's, but you are going to be obviously assessed on certain aspects of it. So it just, all these years, I know you'll all know exactly what I mean by this, because you must sit and walk your dogs or whatever, and you must have thoughts of going, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that means, or does that fit with that, or does this fit with this? Well, over quite a few years of thinking those rational and mainly irrational thoughts, I've tried to put the rational ones together to actually come up with this sort of assessment, if you like. So one of the things that we sort of learn about is the plane of movement or plane of motion. So that's the planes that the body moves. An interesting one because it's interesting and may not be relevant at all. I actually find the planes of movement a really interesting assessment for, especially with the exercises, because it really helps me with how a dog moves. So that's that one. So I have to try and fit with the P's. So the myofascial patterning, now that is something that's going to really be a big part of your learning, and I think that's what engages a lot of you, learning more about the fascia. Now we're going to be looking much more at the practical side, the applied side. There's some fantastic information out now, which is great. And when I started all those centuries ago, there really was very, very little. There was quite a bit on the human, but it hadn't then been taken into the animal world. Then, of course, it was taken on by the equine world. And now, of course, we've got a lot more connected to the canine, which is just great. So we're looking at the myofascial connections, balance, synchronization, muscle activation, all of that, what actually is within that dog's movement. Where are the inhibitions? What particular chain might be affected? That type of thinking and looking at that global perspective of the dog. Purpose, there might be a better name for this, but when we look at our comfort scale, we ask what dogs can do in different categories, like can they pee, can they poo, how do they eat from a bowl? All these things are vital to a dog's actual function to exist. If they can't eat properly or comfortably, they can't pee or poo comfortably, then their world is really reduced. So we're going to be looking at more detail about what dogs can do, because again, that gives you feedback on things like plane of movement and also the myofascial patterning too. So that, again, as I said, will be another set of slides we look at another night, another evening. Pace, the ability to perform gaits with the correct patterning. Now, we all know that we all look at walk, and walk is one of the most difficult gaits for a dog to perform. And that goes back to every type of dog, from perhaps even the fittest dog, or thought of as being fittest dog, down to the dog that has various issues and reduced mobility. So looking at the pace and the different gaits and what their ability is incredibly important, but within the correct patterning. And that's the other aspect, which again could link with the myofascial patterning, the plane of movement, or it could even link with linking it to purpose. And if they can't perform something that you think they should be able to perform, is that part of your puzzle to put an assessment together? Posture, well, I'm not going to speak much more on that. We're going to be going much more in depth with posture. And I know that is a passion of a lot of yours, because you realize that that is basically the language of the dog in discomfort with any sort of myofascial dysfunction. So that is a fantastic non-verbal language that is so authentic that the dog speaks. and we are learning to read. So the more you can read that, the more you're going to understand. And I know that a lot of you look at posture, but we really are going to be diving deeply into this to look at that, which of course will then lead on to distance support programs, etc., etc. Part of posture that we haven't really looked at much, but is actually, I believe, a bit of a separate segment of that, is the position of the feet. And this is something which is a subject all on its own. The position of the feet in relation to the body and the shape of the position, their toes and shape of their nails. There is so much in this that we will be looking at as part of posture. And quite often you might look at one half of a dog and it gives you one story. You look at the bottom half and it gives you a whole different story. So those are some of the things that we'll be covering within all those assessment criteria, but those are what I sort of put together as some major tools for assessing each dog you see. And a lot of those you will be able to assess those in not much time. It won't take you much time to look at posture, position, then answer the questions on the comfort scale. You may have more to ask about their purpose, and of course then plane of movement if you get any videos. So there's a lot there to grapple with for the time being. Anyway, all of which equals the 7th P, which really is proprioception. So we're looking at everything to do with movement, I believe, with each case we see. Now I'm going to come out of here and then you're going to see my jumbled tabs until I go into the next let's sort of set of slides. Any questions or any comments or anything at all? Does that make sense? Those lot, have you? I know I've put them up there. Does that sort of make sense to? Yeah, great, good. That was it. Obviously, you had to say yes. Right. So let's go into. So tonight we are doing planes of movement, which I know it really does screw with people's heads. This, but there are only 3, and they're not vital, but I think they're important. And the thing is, they're not pure. That's the big thing. They are not pure, and we'll look at that at the end. They are an indication. But the reason that I believe planes of movement are important, because I have seen, and I think when if you guys haven't thought of it before, when you think of it now, I think there's a rapidly diminishing plane of movement that dogs have. And I think it goes very much in the same way for each dog. So let's just go through this and let's see what you think about it. So basically, planes of movement, where a dog started a movement and where they finished and how did they get there. That's sort of what we're looking at. So these are the 3 planes of movement that we'll be looking at. And I suppose the best way, and I know you read all the textbooks and they say, imagine a piece of glass going through the body, and that's where you move. And that's what I'm going to say. Imagine a piece of glass going through the body, but imagine that they can only move, or even a rod, that might be easier. To think of a rod that they can only move in that direction. So this one, they can only go forwards or backwards. This one, they can only go left or right. And this one, they can only twist. And that's it. So as you can see, it isn't pure, but it's an indication of how dogs get from one point to the next. And that's what this is all about, getting from one point to the next. How do they do that? And that's important especially during exercises, because you'll feel it potentially, but then when you see it also, that will aid to your skills with the hands-on. So this, and by the way, I just want to thank Rosemary Sattler for producing all these pictures. And it's purely for Anne, so she can enjoy looking at Labradors, because most of them are Labradors. Because there we go. I mean, she gets some great working pictures, and of course, when they're moving and they're moving at speed, it's quite nice to have a look at just pretty fit dogs. Not always, but pretty fit dogs doing a movement. So there's your straightforward sagittal plane of movement, forwards or backwards. Now, as we know, dogs don't really go backwards. It's not their natural thing, but the sagittal plane would still be within the forwards or backwards mode. So again, it's split. The body is split to the left and the right side, and that's where that rod goes through. So they can't turn left or right because the rod is straight through their body. They can only really go forwards. And that, to me, is what most dogs can only do, that, which is desperate. They lose their two other planes of movement, but they're left with their sagittal plane, and that's it. Sometimes they only even start with their sagittal plane. It depends how they've been developed as a puppy. So that, for me, is the one movement that they are left with. So that is just forwards and backwards. That's a nice, fairly straight, easy one. So here we go. Here are the weird, I've sort of tipped a dog upside down so you can see it works all the way through their body. And that, again, just to give you more sort of indication on that. So here's another plane of movement, which is lovely to see because you can see the dogs finding that easy. This type of twist, turn is not something that they are particularly bothered about. Okay, might be slightly sort of invested in picking up this dummy, but still, it's more for demonstration on movements. And this movement is the frontal plane of movement. And that splits them from top to bottom. So that's where the line goes. Now, the way I remember frontal, I think of the face being frontal, and they can only go left or right. So that's the way I sort of remember frontal. There are only three, but it is interesting how they do get a bit confusing. So they're split top to bottom, dorsal, ventral, and this is an action for turning left or right. And there it is again, so you can see how it looks on the dog, that rod going through them. So as you can see, well, that one doesn't actually, it looks like it could go left or right, but let's look at this one more. They can only go left or right. It is quite difficult to demonstrate. So again, they can only go left or right, spin through that rod. So this one is an incredible movement. Let me move on to the next slide. So it's a transverse. So this is where you split the dog down the middle between caudal and cranial, and they rotate. So this movement, I believe, some dogs don't even have particularly as puppies, because we don't develop, or people don't develop, those cross-lateral lines that go across the body that enable that movement, and they don't connect the dog here to enable that movement. So this transverse movement is one movement that I think most dogs lose very early on. And it's something that really does demonstrate that their front and their back end are connected comfortably, and they can perform that type of action. So you've got the cranial caudal division, and you've got action moving through rotation. So it's not something we see a lot in everyday stuff, but it's still, and that's probably part of the reason why dogs don't have a chance to practice that movement or develop that movement or strengthen that plane of movement. They probably have, well, they do have it when they're born because of all the shifting and turning within the litter as a puppy. All of those movements are developed, but the moment they leave that environment, that's when this opportunity potentially it leaves them to, so they can't enable them to actually practice and use it. Now, this isn't something that we're necessarily going to be doing in any of our exercises, but it'd be something that we will encourage them to do if they can, to be able to do it, to look at an exercise and go, how are you going to present yourself to perform that exercise? So it's not going to be forced, it's going to be encouraged, and see if they choose to use that method to actually perform an exercise. But that obviously is something we'll look at later, but we won't be doing anything like, let's throw an object into water and let's see them leap off the side, because that's not something we necessarily want to encourage for any form of rehab. So there we go, another just sort of demonstration of where that rod is going through. And as you can see, that is what enables that type of action. But then again, it can also be that action too. And that's obviously a very young dog, and launching one way and then deciding to go the other way. So that is actually a transverse, but also potentially frontal movement too. And that's what I mean by it being not particularly pure. And I don't want you to get too hung up on it. So what plane of movement is that? Anyone?
Sagittal.
Sagittal.
Thank you. Thank you. Correct. Correct. There's the right answer. Right, next one. What about this one?
Frontal.
Which direction is he going in?
Going forward, it's still sagittal, isn't it?
Sagittal.
It's sagittal. Yeah. It's sagittal, and that's what I mean by it not being pure, because you can't imagine a dog that is really compromised to be able to form that type of sagittal movement, but that is still a sagittal movement. Which plane of movement?
That's frontal.
Frontal, because going left and right, isn't it? Yeah.
Frontal, absolutely. Yeah, think of the face, left and right. Yeah, absolutely. What about these? God, those, now aren't they just two beautiful dogs? They're stunners. Mad Maggie and terrifying Tilly. So what about these two? What about this one? What about Maggie?
Transverse.
Okay, and Tilly?
Frontal.
Let's see if you're right. Yes, you are. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Isn't that a great picture? That was a couple of years ago now. Right, which plane of movement for this one?
Going forwards, isn't it?
Frontal.
Or is it?
Yeah, frontal.
Yeah.
Transverse.
Yeah, because it's actually twisting, but also probably a bit of flexion in there too. Because can you see the line of the shoulders compared to the line of the pelvis?
Mm.
So this is interesting. We'll have a look at, I don't know why I put that, transverse coronary. Yeah, shaking. Shaking is an interesting one, and we all assess shaking. So so a question, does a healthy dog use two planes of movement? An unhealthy one use just one? And let's just look at that. Hopefully this slide works. So this is a healthy dog. How many planes of movement is this dog using?
So all three.
Now all three with the sagittal, but what about during the actual? Quite interesting.
frontal and transverse, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
definitely transverse all the way through. But the frontal, are they actually turning left or right? Is it? It's a rhetorical question. I'm just asking. It's just, I don't know if we need to come up with an answer, but I just think it's quite an interesting. Let me try and get on to the next one. And then have a look at this one, the old favorite, you know, this one. Is plane of movement relevant for assessing shaking? Any thoughts?
So in the healthy
I think
dog,
it.
go on, sorry.
Sorry.
Go on, Faye.
I was just going to say, in the healthy dog, it's actually picking up its feet left and right as well at the same time, isn't it? Its feet
Yeah.
are actually moving, whereas in the unhealthy dog, its feet don't actually leave the floor. So in that respect, there's a small amount of frontal,
Yeah,
very small,
yeah,
but it is still there.
yeah,
I think when we went through this before, what I noticed in my practice before, I just used to look at, were they shaking whole body or were they just shaking that front end versus back end? But now, like Faye's literally just said what I was going to say, it's really made me notice about their paw placement when they do it, because some of them, they want to shake whole body, but they're so busy trying to plant their paws to stabilize that shake.
yeah.
And that's what, after we did this before, it really made me notice and look at it in a different way. Because before I was often just thinking, oh yeah, they can shake the front end, but they can't shake the back end. But now you can really see how that force then goes through the body, and how they stabilize when they shake is often a really good indicator of which muscles they're overworking when they're then moving, doing other things.
Yeah. I've also seen that some of them just stabilize on one leg and lift the other leg off the ground because they can't bear that extreme movement going through. The shake is something that, we all look at, but I think the more areas that we can discuss and look at for an assessment, I think is really interesting. So it's great that you're looking at more. And I think where they pause and where they load and what they do with their paws in every situation is obviously so vital, because it reflects the whole body, whatever they're doing.
But,
so
with the unhealthy dog, doing the shake, due to that instability that's there, maybe you might be seeing some of those planes of movement, such as the transverse, but it doesn't mean you're seeing it necessarily in a healthy way.
No,
if that makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you're seeing the movement, but it's not necessarily a good movement in that situation, because it's actually because they lack stability that they can't hold that paw rocking position.
Yeah. And maybe for when assessing shaking, we've got to look at it as a whole movement rather than each separate part of their body. So can they do that whole transverse movement from the beginning to the end, not just part of it? I don't know. This is the sort of things that I really sort of welcome these. I want to talk about this stuff because I think we've all seen things in very different ways. And I think we can really have a good collective on this and really put some good ideas together. Right. So come on, we've seen you enough now. So, and then we're faced with a picture like this and go, wow, how many different planes of movement there are there? That's, if anyone wants to have a go at it, that's fine. This one's interesting. But you see, what I love looking at are pictures like this is when you see that elbow there and the ability for that elbow to be there and the ability for that elbow to be there. And that will bring us on to something that we'll be doing at the end of this. So just a nice little recap. I'll put these slides up so you can obviously go look at them again. But a nice recap to just sort of make it clearer on what these planes of movement are. So what I'm going to set you are these two advanced techniques and scapular mobilization. And I honestly believe that these are game changers for so many dogs. The dogs that I obviously you can't always do these techniques, and I'm not going to insult you by going warm the tissues first, blah blah blah, use it in a sensible time. I'm not going to insult you with that. I'm going to just show you what they are, and they're reasonable videos, so you can practice yourself. So let's just set one going now. Let me see if I can make it bigger. Oh, without all the, sorry, it's all the rubbish of YouTube. Can't be any bigger than that. Sorry about the gently spelling. Please ignore that. You'll only see it now. So this is a retraction. We do a lot of retraction of, within passive movement. And you're always told, no, 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 don't do the retraction of the thoracic limb. But actually now, because you could do so much harm if you do it incorrectly, well, anything can do harm. But this is a really powerful, powerful technique. And as you can see, obviously I'd warned her before, but afterwards they definitely need a real ironing out of that. But what you're doing is freeing some of the tissues from obviously the cranial aspect of the limb and the scapula, but you're also freeing so many of the cervical tissues too. And as you know, this is such an area of blockage for so many dogs. So many dogs walk around like this. To have that retraction of the limb is so, most of them absolutely just fall into it and love it. And quite often when I'm treating a dog, they will drop their head over that end of the sofa to actually get more of an extension over their neck so they can really open it out. It is a fantastic technique. Anne and I think Lucy's used this. Carol and Lucy, have you used these? Jen, have you used this? Because I know you've been introduced to it with the CPD you did before. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was muting because I'm coughing and spluttering. Yeah, I found it's made quite a big difference, especially in like, you get a lot of them, don't you, that are front loading and they get that real sort of tension between the scapula. The big dog that Arku that I've been working with it's made a huge difference to him because he was literally kind of handstanding on his shoulders a lot of time. The Alatonian Shepherd that I sent you the stuff on.
Yeah, oh that was, I've got to try and get out of this now. That was quite a case, that one, wasn't it? That's quite something. Yeah, what was I going to say on this? It's gone from me. Yeah, you see me within that video sort of easing. It looks like I'm trying to pull her leg off. You don't necessarily need to do it in a straight movement. You can just ease and relax, ease and relax, ease and relax. Remember, you're working with myofascial connections. You're working with fascia. Fascia quite likes these gentle movements to sort of warm the tissues and ask the tissues to actually respond to that movement. So you can do this gentle protraction, ease off, protraction, ease off. Some of the principles that you have used during your diploma, they're not wrong, but you're using more advanced principles because you can feel the tissues and you can feel when it gives and feel that you can hold it in that position. So that particular scapular mobilization is just brilliant. And this one with it, and I'm sure Jen, you've used this too with that very same dog. This one for me is an absolute game changer because underneath that scapula, you've got the serratus ventralis and you've got various other very deep tissue, very deep fascial tissue holding that arm in position. And what happens is the scapula can become adhered to those tissues. So what you want to be doing is actually easing that scapula, because the scapula should be really free moving. It really, really should. It shouldn't be stuck to those tissues. And a lot of the time we don't realize that is the case. So even if you can't do this whole exercise, if you can just get hold of the scapula and just try and mobilize it a little bit. I like to put my hands over the dorsal border and just ease it down just to see what is going on there. And sometimes you go, there is nothing. You cannot move it. So we're doing all this superficial stuff, but this activates the tissues subscapular and allows that serratus ventralis, which, as we know, is the most spectacular muscle, to actually start to support the scapula, support that thoracic limb, but more importantly, allow more movement, because then we're allowing this fascial chain to start moving and mobilizing in a much more functional way. But you've got to make sure that you don't lift the leg too far. You've got to keep anatomical position. Every technique we will show you, you've got to maintain the anatomical position. Otherwise, I mean, unless you're purposefully taking it away, but for something like that, when you are trying to actually replicate a functional movement, you've got to keep it within that function. Then there are other techniques that we'll show you that you can use to sort of abduct or adduct the limb. So let's come out of there. Go back to here. So do any of you do any of those sort of scapular mobilizations? Because I know you've been on other courses and things. Carol, have you got volume tonight, Carol? No, you haven't. We'll have to, yeah, that's annoying. Anyone else use those? Anne, have you had good success with them?
I primarily on my dog, my lab.
Yeah.
And he, like you said, he just extends his neck out now to
Does
just
he?
really get more of the stretch. Yeah.
Have you noticed a different sort of range within now from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean his range is pretty good anyway. But I would say I can't push it anymore. You know, he's reached the end of it. I mean, anatomically that's it. He's pretty good, especially the forwards one, which I would say was more restricted than the retraction.
Right. Okay. Brilliant.
Yeah, he loves it.
Excellent. And Tuli.
Yeah, no, I've used it quite a lot, and I do particularly with front loading dogs, and you can almost see them relax into it when you do.
Yeah, excellent. And I know Jen, I know Lucy, you use it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I use it, but I think, you know, watching the videos again, I think I take it to a point, if you know what I mean. And looking at that, I think I can probably, especially with the retraction, take it as and where appropriate with the right dogs, obviously not as a general rule, but I think maybe with some I don't take it as far as actually I could for that dog's benefit.
I think with the retraction, the most difficult part for me is where I put my hand, the one that's actually easing the limb, because the temptation would be to put it over the elbow, because that's probably a more supportive position. But how many tissues are you actually restricting by putting your hand there? So in that picture, it's over the carpus, but of course, some dogs might not be that happy with that. So you've got to use your knowledge to actually apply these techniques in a way that is appropriate for that dog or those dogs that you are treating. So both of those techniques, once you practice them, we need a video of you with all your name and everything, of you demonstrating that, so we can tick those off your course. So those are two of the techniques to get going. We thought it was better to start with just a couple and then build up. Don't want to overface you guys, but then again, you need challenging. So I am going to now show you this, and I'm rather hoping, I mean, this is a very interesting, just a series of pictures put into a video. This is quite interesting. This is my guys going under a gate. So again, this is sagittal, but it's sagittal flexion extension, very like that dog going into the water. So it's still the sagittal plane, but there aren't many dogs that can actually get under a barrier like that. Maggie has always been incredibly good at it, so she can always get into a field that she shouldn't. But it's just looking at how they manage that from different perspectives. And if you want to, I can always give you the link to this. If you become a real geek, which I'm sure you all are already, are going to want to study this in a little more detail. The photos aren't always the best quality, but I think they're very interesting. But look at what's going on here. And could that be one of the reasons why so many dogs can't do things like this? And that's exactly the mobilization that you're going to be working on with that technique. So that was Tilly. So now we're going to, I think we're going to move on to Maggie. I'm not sure. Oh, that's Tilly still moving away, because I think it's also important to see how they approach. Oh, it's from the back view. That's good. How they approach, very uneven from the back, very uneven. Tilly from the back. Her back end is not good. So you can see she does not do this in a symmetrical way. But I just find it fascinating how the first stride, or the first two strides leading into something like this, and the next two leading out of them, what are they doing? I mean, look at that. And that's why it's really important when you're doing the exercises to have proper lead in and lead out. That was doing her a disservice. She was actually 13 there. It was last summer we did these. I know that because she hasn't got her two front teeth. I know. But there is a particularly good side view, lateral view of her doing this. But it's her back end, how she's got the strength still to be able to push herself through. So she's relying very much, but look at that. Look at where her actual scapulae are above her body. And she's quite weak there, but she's using her obviously her thoracic region more, but she still manages to connect through to her pelvic region to still push her through. Yeah, Maggie, you did very well. Well done. Well done. Fantastic. So if you want to just, if I can easily give you the link to that video, it's just, I think the more you see and the more you look and the more you question, I think the more you will learn. Also, the more you'll go, I have no idea, but the more you will question that. Any comments on that? Interesting, not interesting? I mean, everyone's obviously
I want to add actually.
Interesting. Sorry?
I just want to add, thinking of the scapular mobilization. I had a terrier recently, and left and right scapula, there was my whole thumb distance between the heights of them because of a fight that it had had with another terrier. And they'd obviously, you know, be quite like they kind of would go ratting. So that whole shaking movement. And that shoulder depression was amazing with that, getting her right. And the physio, she'd been to physio, they'd done all sorts of things and they couldn't work out why she was still lame. And it was just that general palpation that I was like, geez, hang on a minute. Like,
it's not moving,
out of line. And
did
yeah,
they realign? Did they realign?
Realign in one session. And she, wow. And she absolutely was in proper terrier fight or flight mode when I first saw her. She didn't want to sit still. She didn't want to do anything. And really interesting that she'd been to see an animal communicator as well. This lady had tried everything. And the first thing she said to me was, I've been to see an animal communicator. You might think it's a bit woo-woo because not everybody's into that sort of thing. And I just want to tell you what she said. But she didn't tell me what she'd said until sort of after I said, oh, I think we're going to way we'll start working because this is the way she's feeling. That's exactly what the dog was telling this lady. She said, my shoulders don't feel right. And it was quite freaky because everything we went through was what this dog had apparently told this animal communicator. But yeah, one session, and whereas I could barely touch her to start with when I was having a feel, as soon as she kind of realised what I wanted to do, she just properly, like, stretched into it. The neck was out one way, the leg was out the other.
Yeah.
Absolutely relaxed into it. It was amazing. To start with, I thought I was going to lose fingers, but
amazing.
it made
talk about double validation for you and validation for the communicator too. Incredible. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, I can't wait for you to start on all these techniques. And as I said, this is experiential learning. So I would obviously, I mean, you're not going to go straight in and use it on your first client, but I'll definitely practice on your own dogs first, or on perhaps a client that you know well, and really see how you get on with this, because it really is, it can be an absolute game changer. It really can.
I found that watching the gate, both yours going under the gate, fascinating. Oh, yeah. Because just thinking about the movement, I've now got to work out how I can film this, because obviously mine being little, they'd scoot under there, but we've got our patio furniture's got a very, very little gap underneath, and it's in a corner. And Maisie, at the age of 15, does this amazing, we don't know, I need to get under there somehow with her. The way she can get under and push herself back out again defies everything you think she should be able to do.
Really?
So now I've got to work out how I get a camera under the patio furniture, because it's really made me think she's doing very similar movements.
Yeah. Just a camera on the floor.
Yeah, at the back.
Yeah,
I'll give that a go.
I think sometimes we really make the mistake. We just got to get the cameras down to their level and floor level, because that's when you see so much. Now, I really look forward to seeing that, Lucy.
It's meant to be warm this weekend. She goes under there because she gets too hot. So I'll have to leave my camera out there.
No, that would be really good. That'd be really interesting. Yeah. I mean, I don't think we can ever view too many movements like that to just really work out how they do it. And that's at the beginning when I said, plane of movement, it's a useful assessment, but it really is working out how a dog is doing something, getting from one point to the other, and how they do that. So not just with the plane, but actually how they put themselves together to achieve that sort of movement. So just a couple of things before I open it up to anyone else for any questions. I want you all to try one thing, and then I'm going to set you all a challenge, and I'm going to try and think of a good challenge to set you at the end of every one. I may run out, but I've got a great challenge to start with. But first of all, what I want you to do, and I will tell you, I tried this with Kushla, and I cannot tell you how difficult it was. No, Kushla, your elbows in no, so I'm sure you're all going to be much better, but I am going to give you more of a view. That's why I pushed myself back. So first of all, I want you, oh, my camera's a little bit late. Hang on a minute, which arm is it? This one, that one. Right, I'm in mirror image, so it's difficult to see. Right, stand up, and I want everyone
Oh,
Everyone
I'll disappear.
will move backwards or something. As long as you can see me, this is just
My dog's asleep behind me.
Oh.
Sorry, Ripley.
Right. Then I want you to flex your elbows so you're in a line. All right. Then I want you to extend or hyperextend your wrist. Like this. So flex your elbow, sort of against your body, and then hyperextend your wrist. I got terrible wrist flex. So once you've extended your wrist, where do you feel that pull? I mean, I feel it here. Oh, you feel it right up there.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel.
Down there, but do you feel it over the wrist? Do you feel it sort of, you don't feel it over the wrist at all?
I feel it there.
You're hypermobile. You've got two hypermobile people here. It doesn't help. But, or three. Right, you don't feel it in your wrist at all. Someone must feel it in their wrist. You're hyperextending your, thank you, Kushla. That's the right. Anyway, it's no right answer. Right, now what I want you to do is extend your arm and keep hyperextending your wrist. Where do you feel the strain now? Down the arm more? Yeah. I'm only going to look at Anne and Kushla.
Okay.
Now take your arm behind you. Now where do you feel the actual way? Yeah, all the way. And I actually can feel it right up here into my, almost into my neck.
Darling, we meet you.
So what I'm trying to get you all to, I'm probably doing it really badly, is trying to show you that joints block fascial connections in certain directions, obviously. So what you're looking to do is trying to unblock those and take that drive and those chains all the way through the body. And it's one way of actually feeling that different exercises, different ways of reducing inhibition will help the dog as a whole. Because the moment you put a block in with your wrist, you shouldn't be feeling too much more through your arm. The moment you open your, you extend your elbow, you've got much more free flow. The moment you change your direction, you're opening up different patterns, fibers, and everything else. So that was the whole point of the exercise. So hopefully you sort of got it a little bit. So the tutorial 1 challenge is also fascial based. And it's something that Amanda and I have discussed actually, but I'm going to challenge you all to this. I want you to walk barefooted over grass, over different types of surfaces, but on grass. Please don't come to me if you stand on a stone or anything. Please be aware of where you're going. I want you to do this, but not just for a few steps. I'm now, I muck out the field and I do it barefooted. It is the most awesome experience. I actually now go for walks and I take my shoes and socks off. And my feet are disgusting because they've just got mud. I do wash them, obviously, but I want you to all go barefooted. And do you know why I'm asking you all to do this? Just any ideas? Amanda, you're not allowed to. There are 2 reasons actually, but the one main reason for this.
It changes your whole gait pattern and proprioception. It's really interesting you say that actually, because over here, I just always thought it was like Kiwis are just kind of feral. The kids do not wear shoes.
Brilliant.
So when they get in school, they all have shoe racks outside the classroom, so they can wear them to school. But they take them off when they go in the classroom. They nearly always have them off on the play equipment. For PE, they have a choice whether they want to wear them or not. And it is really, really interesting. Just because obviously I used to teach kids with PE, and I've got a huge thing about getting kids to do for barefoot anyway. But yeah, it's been a real eye opener. So I'm looking forward to this challenge. Thank you, Julia.
You're welcome.
It's going to change your foot shape, surely. It's going to change the shape.
Where are you?
I'm like, I'm here. I know where I am. it's going to change the shape of your foot. I would always choose not to wear shoes.
Mm.
This
Well,
is why barefoot shoes are becoming so popular, aren't they?
Sorry, say that again, Faye.
I said barefoot shoes are becoming really, really popular.
But someone's leaving. Yeah, there are a few, absolutely, and it's really important because, as you say, Jen, our whole gait pattern has changed because we wear shoes. But it's from what I want you to consider. The perspective is the fascial connections all the way through to our feet and toes affect our whole balance through our whole body. I find that, or I have found that when I wear wellies, I clench my toes, which I am actively trying to stop doing now, because can you imagine what effects those fascial lines are having on or scrunched up feet? My father was quite old. He was 94 and he was quite mobile, but the one thing that seized on him were his ankles. My ankles, when I went barefoot, ached so badly after walking for about 20 minutes barefooted. They ached, and I thought, my word, and it's because they were becoming immobile. Because if you look at a human foot, it's like the distal end of a distal end, the distal anatomy of a dog's foot is all these soft tissues, all leading into the toes and the feet. And if we're not moving them, they're all becoming jammed, blocked, adhered, stuck, whatever you want to say. We've got to keep mobility. And if we are not keeping mobility in our feet, that is going to reflect through our body. So again, I'm all about feeling it and then doing it. We will then realize how important these techniques are that we'll be doing on the distal limbs of our dogs too, and looking at their toes, their feet, their plantar and palmar surfaces. So not only did I get very achy ankles, but I felt massive changes going right up through the center of my body. I mean, huge changes. It was really quite uncomfortable. And yet it was great because I knew it was a positive activation, if you like. So I want everyone to do this and be careful, but do it and reflect on how they feel, because I want to hear next time if there was anything that you felt. I actually felt like my pubis was out of alignment and it went straight up. That's how centrally it went up through my body, as well as my ankles. Not my knees, not my hips, my ankles. And I've never been worried about my ankles. The other thing, it's just really good to be in touch with the earth and earthing out. You read about that, it's quite interesting. Earthing out is really powerful. We don't do it enough. We don't actually connect to the earth. So that's your challenge. And I want you to, when you're doing it, try and be aware but unaware of your body. So there we go. So you've got homework to do. You've got more homework to do as well. Ha! I knew that. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to laugh like a cackle then. On the portal, I'll share the screen so you can see. On the portal, there is this video. And what I would like you to do is just identify some of the planes of movement. So what you do is stop it and then take a screenshot. Like I've got this snip tool, sort of take a screenshot like that. Different computers have different things. Take a copy, put it on a document and say which plane of movement that dog was moving in at that particular time. As simple as that. And go through it. And if you see a different plane of movement, just put lots of screenshots, not too many. But I want a good example of all three, maybe two good examples of all three. And it's nice and simple here. And then we move on to there, which is not quite as simple. but just quite nice and entertaining to watch. So I hope that that is on your portal as a link for you to have a look at. Great. Thank you, Barbara, for sorting all those out. So that sort of comes to the end. I can't believe we don't really want to go any longer than an hour and a half. So I've just gone over an hour. But obviously we want to have time for any questions. So I know this is evening, everyone's had a day's work. So is this about the right amount of time for you guys to be able to concentrate? Yeah. Because I can just keep talking. But I need to drink my water. Obviously it isn't. Any questions or anything you want to ask? Everyone clear
Yes,
about what they're doing? Yes, Faye.
When does the homework need to be done by?
The thing is, you're going to be getting homework ongoing.
Yeah, so keep up with it.
Just keep up with it. I'm not going to really, I think we put some sort of guidelines in the manual. You're grown-ups. You're all grown-ups. Do it when you can. The other thing I will ask is that I will get around to assessing it as soon as I can. But obviously that might take a little bit longer than I would like it to sometimes, because I don't think I've even assessed your techniques yet, have I, Carol? Don't think no, I will. Thank you for being so wonderfully patient. So that's the homework plus also your techniques, but I think I'd rather know if you're having problems with them. I would like to see them to just make sure that they are being done correctly. I'm sure they will be, but they also needed for assessment. So get on with those. If you want to do those first, that's up to you. If you want to do that first, it's up to you.
Just those two things, the video of us performing the new techniques.
Yep.
And the taking the screenshots and describing the plane of motion.
Absolutely. Yeah, no problem at all. Great. Any other?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. With well, we submitted our techniques before. Have they been loaded on the portal? Or do you need us to resubmit them onto the portal? You're doing it, okay.
Yeah, I think you sent them in. Did you send them YouTube or video?
No idea.
No, I can't remember. I know Carol
Probably video.
Yeah, I do need them in YouTube. Is everyone happy with loading them up to YouTube, then sending a link? Because I think you did that, didn't you, Carol? There's instructions about starting your own YouTube channel. It's just it's going to be easier. It's going to be more portable for us for IQA. Yes, laser. Yeah. It's going to be more. Anyone that's done it already, I think you sent videos, Anne, didn't you? I can convert those, don't worry. It's just going to be easier for us because we don't have the capacity on the portal to upload that number of videos. So we thought it's much easier just to change to YouTube. Everyone happy with that? Excellent. So any other questions at all? So the next one, I've got the date up. I do want to get the date right. The 21st, I think, of August. I did have the 20th. 20th. Great. Okay, so that's going to be fascia, the intro. Yes. Yeah. So we will go from planes of movement to fascia. Right. Lovely to see everyone. Really exciting this. If you've got any technical issues, please let me know. Let Barbara know, possibly, as soon as possible. Please don't go round, thinking that you've got it wrong. But I think you probably understand things now. The Moodle site, you should all have access to the resource on the Moodle site too. I think you've all checked that. Great. Jen, have a lovely day. And everyone else, have a lovely evening, and see you, if not before, in a few weeks' time, a couple of weeks' time. Brilliant. Bye.